Hi and welcome back to Gavin's Sonex B. This is part 2 of the catch up after Christmas. It's currently the middle of February at the moment, but the last video I took you around the work that I've been doing on the cockpit, and in this video I'm going to take you around the work that I've been doing to the tail cone. And it's lots of little jobs, but all things that needed doing, all part of my plan to get the tail cone as complete as possible prior to joining it permanently to the forward fuselage cockpit. And so where shall we start? Well, you'll recall I had the fun and games with the side panel, the plastic ABS side panel in the cockpit. Well, I've also done the two trim panels that go on the tail cone just behind the pilot and passengers' heads. And so if I turn you round, we'll have a chat about those. These are the panels that I'm talking about. They're ABS plastic, and it finishes off this area here and closes off this side area here. Now when you get them, they're flat, and they have you have to trim the edges all the way round. I haven't got a picture of them before I started cutting them, but they have an amount of flashing around the outside of them. Again, they're probably vacuum formed in some way. Now you've got to put a pretty much a 90-degree bend into the panel, and there's a mark down the panel where the bend needs to be, which is pretty much in the right place. But I was a bit concerned about bending them because depending on what kind of plastic it is, it may bend or it may just fracture and break off. So I used a piece that I'd cut off from the outside to try it with, and sure enough, if you overbend it, it turns white and fractures. So what I did to bend them was I used an industrial heat gun, and I've got it down here somewhere. There it is. So I used a heat gun like that, heated up the area around the join. I was a bit worried about melting it, but actually this plastic is quite difficult to melt, so I got it relatively hot and then bent it, let it cool, and then let go of it, and managed to bend them without it showing any stress at all. So that's good. They fit pretty well, as you can see. The only area where I had to trim them a bit was up this leading edge here, and then there are little dimples showing where the securing screws need to go. Now I'm going to use self-tapping screws to hold these on at the moment, unless I change my mind. And so I've drilled through each one, and at the moment there's a Cleco holding it on. I've also fitted the headphone sockets. They're different sizes, one's for the microphone, one's for the headphone, and they are actually drilled through the plastic, through the aluminium behind, and then you need to fit an isolating washer, a little top hat washer on the back side, so that when you insert the socket, it doesn't make any contact with the aluminium of the aircraft. This is to stop you from creating a ground loop, which will manifest itself as interference on your communications. The only ground path should be from the radio to the headphone socket, and not through the chassis of the aircraft. So I did those. That all fitted in quite nicely. Whilst I was doing that, I decided to fit the MGL SP6 and SP7 units, and I've been umming and ahhing about what to do with these. One is the compass, the SP6, and the SP7 is the artificial horizon sensor. Lots of people have said lots and lots of different things. The compass, you need to keep away from large moving magnetic things, anything steel. It's a small aircraft, so getting it away from things like that is quite difficult. Some people put them on the, out towards the wingtips to get them as far away as possible from anything. I decided not to bother doing that. I mean, this is just a Sunday airplane. It's I'm not trying to win any prizes for construction or anything like that. I just want it to roughly work, and to be quite honest, having all this additional equipment on a small light aircraft is unnecessary, really. I'm going to have a proper compass, and don't need the artificial horizon really, but it just makes it just a bit nicer. So what I've done is made a mistake, really, but it's a mistake that's fixable. I've located them on the first cross member back inside the tail cone, and so I fabbed up some brackets and have mounted them. The brackets are non-ferrous, the fixings are non-ferrous. I've got some aluminium riv nuts on there with plastic screws, and using a little technique that I used to use, which is to actually put a grommet, a rubber grommet in there, so that the unit is actually has a rubber mounting either side of the plastic leg there, which will give it a little bit of anti-vibration mounting as well. So hopefully that's all going to work. But those of you who've already built your Sonex B will have immediately noticed the stupid error that I've made. And if you look over the top of the two units in the background, you'll see two brackets sticking up, and they are the seatbelt attachment points. And I did exactly what I'm doing now. I fitted these things and then stepped back and looked and went, oh no, the seatbelts that's exactly where the seatbelts come across. So I'm proposing to, I'm not going to move the units, but what I am going to do is actually put a piece of elastic shock cord from this area here all the way across to this one here, so there's basically be a line across, and then bring the seat belts over the top, and that will keep them away from the boxes when you're not wearing the seat belt. When it all goes slack, when you take it off, the little washing line will keep them away from the two units. Also, what else I've been working on is locating the radio and transponder. Now, I didn't want to put the radio and transponder up front in the cockpit. I wanted to locate them behind the seat. Initially I was thinking of actually attaching them to the back of the seat, but I then decided that there was a lovely little space there, and so I have actually attached the transponder and the two radios to the underside of the forward cross member. It's an area that is not used for anything. It's out of the way. It makes the wiring quite simple because obviously the wiring to the headphones is fairly close. The wiring to the transponder aerial, which will be underneath, and the wiring to the radio aerial, which will be above, will all be right there. It'll be very short lengths of cable, and I think it's quite a good solution. I did have to contact Trig to find out whether or not mounting the radios upside down would have any detrimental effects, and apparently no, it won't have any detrimental effects. So they're quite happy being mounted upside down, and of course they sit in these lovely little slides, so that if you do want to work on them, you can just pop the catch at the back, and the whole radio unit comes out and leaves the slide attached to the aircraft, which is great. So I've done that, and you'll be saying, well, why have you got two radios? Well, there's a story. Initially, I wanted to use the MGL V16 radio with the Razer touchscreen remote control head. And so I bought them along with all the other MGL stuff that I wanted. And they were delivered, and looked at it and thought, wow, this is really, really good. Unfortunately, I didn't realise that you cannot get an ESA certificate for MGL radios. Now, an ESA certificate is a European type approval certificate, and if you use a radio in an aircraft in Europe, all aircraft radios have to be ESA certified. So I contacted the guy who runs MGL in South Africa, and asked him whether or not he was going to be getting ESA certification for his radios, and he said no, because it's too expensive, and so there's no chance of being able to get my radio system signed off without a certified radio in it. So what I've done is I've ordered a Trig radio instead. Now in France, I don't know whether it's the same in other countries, in order to use a radio in an aircraft, you have to have an LSA certificate, and to get that certificate, that's basically registers your transponder and your radio equipment to the aircraft and allows you to use it. To get that certificate, the installation has to be inspected by an approved radio installation guy, aircraft radio installation guy. I had that done to my other aircraft a couple of years ago now, and as long as he thinks it's okay, corrects any wiring that he's not happy with, checks for the fact that you've got the ESA certificates for all the devices and that you filled out all the paperwork correctly, and then he submits that to the powers that be, the DGAC in France, and they send you an LSA certificate and a call sign back. So that's how it works here. Without it, I wouldn't have a call sign and wouldn't be able to use a radio or a transponder in the aircraft. So what I'm doing is putting the trig one in until I get the license, and then I'll probably use the MGL one anyway, because nobody's going to know. And the MGL one has facilities that I really like, and the trig one doesn't. But there we go. So that's why I fitted 2 radios. Only one will be in at a time, I think. But I've mounted or put the mountings in for all of them now, and the wiring will accommodate both as well. So it's just a question of unclipping one and clipping the other one in when I want to. What else have I been doing? If you remember, there was an update from Sonex about the flap actuator bracket. And originally the flap actuator bracket was situated under here, approximately where this MGL V16 radio is. It's somewhere around about here. And the problem with that was that the actuator ended up in the wrong position when it was up. They'd miscalculated the dimensions when the new actuator, which has a feedback potentiometer in it, was upgraded effectively. So they sent a new bracket, which is now actually mounted on the rear side of the front cross member. And if I very carefully take you around, whoop, nearly dropped, in here, this is the new bracket. Well, it's in 2 parts, one either side of the actuator itself. Quite tricky to put in there. It was a bit of a pain in the bum, and getting it upright and the correct distance apart was a bit of a struggle. I don't really fit into this area very well, and but I managed it, and that's in. The actuator is attached, and I've also put in the flap control arm that goes right the way across as well. That's permanently fitted in now, and it's connected to the actuator. And I must say, if you grab hold of the actual flap arm here, there's no play in it at all. And I'll give you a quick demonstration. Wait one. Here's a handy aircraft battery that I just happen to have lying around, and that's the 2 wires that go to the actual motor on the flap actuator, and down here is the flap actuator arm. And if I touch onto the battery, and this time it stops before it hits the floor, which isn't there, but it does stop before it hits the floor. And then on the way up, it stops there. So that's the flap actuator fitted. And then we've got this little panel here. Now what I'm proposing to do is basically pre-wire the whole of this system. So the headphone sockets, the aerials, the radios, transponder, everything that's back here, I'm going to pre-wire it, and then have basically a set of connectors here, one for each device, and then plugs will go in here to take the wiring forwards. So it'll all be finished off to this panel. The panel I designed by making a paper version of it first, or cardboard version of it first, checking that it fitted and was basically going to work. Can't get it to go on there now. Anyway, you get the idea. And then bent up or punched the panel first, and then bent it up, and it's riveted on. It's riveted across here and then in two places behind, so it's actually as rigid as the side member there. I'm using 9-way D-type connectors. Going to have one for the flaps, and that will carry the power and the feedback pot connections. Then we've got the two radios, or sorry, the radio and the transponder, I should say. So we've got the radio and the transponder, and then lastly the communication bus for the MGL SP6 and SP7, which will run through here, and anything else that I particularly want. I've fitted one of the aerials. That's the radio aerial, that's going on the top there. It's mounted in up under there like that, and the transponder aerial is going to go in the floor immediately below here. This gives them the more than 3-foot separation that they require, and they're on opposite sides of a tin can, so hopefully they won't interfere with each other. I've ordered all the cable, all the connectors, it's all here. So a quick run through of what's arrived. We've got 20 gauge cable. This is for primarily the flap actuator, which requires at least 20 gauge. This is all Tefcel aircraft cable, by the way. Then we've got the extremely expensive coaxial cable for the radio aerial and the transponder. I've used, I can't remember which one I went for now. I think it was the RG400, that's it. It's a RG400, very heavy, serious shield on it, but apparently the transponder requires a really good quality cable. Then we've got some twisted pair, shielded twisted pair. Now that is being used for the headphone and microphone connections to the radios. The microphone in particular needs to be shielded twisted pair. Then we've got 22 gauge, white, red and black, again Tefcel aircraft grade cable, and that's for the rest of the wiring basically. The data connections for the radio, transponder and the SP6 and SP7 don't need to be shielded twisted pair. In actual fact, it doesn't need to be proper twisted pair cable. The recommendations are that you just twist 2 cores together, 1 turn every inch, or 25 mil. So that's what I'm going to do. There's no point in spending the extra on twisted pair cable, because they're differential drive data systems, and as such the CAN bus in particular doesn't require twisted pair at all. It's designed for the automotive industry for communication over relatively short distances, because a car's not very long. And as such it's very robust data signaling system, but I will twist 2 cores together with 1 turn every inch. for the data. And that's about where I am at the moment. I think that's covered pretty well everything. Things that are on my list, I have a long list of things. Things I haven't done. We're looking at setting the rudder cables. That's the next thing on the list. And then we have got, oh yes, the landing gear. We can have a quick talk about the landing gear. On the tail dragger, the landing gear inserts, or the legs insert into the frame, engine frame. And I'm having a hell's own job trying to get them to go in. Somewhere around here is one of the legs. There it is. 2 seconds. So basically, the leg is a titanium bar. I don't know what diameter it is. It looks to be just over an inch, probably 1.1 inches, is it? Something like that, anyway. And it has to insert into that hole there. Now, the tube that runs up here is actually bigger than the diameter of the leg, but it has 2 short pieces of smaller diameter tube welded into it. So there's one in the end here. It's probably about 1.5 inches deep into there, and the same at the other end. So the leg only actually contacts a very short piece at the top and a short piece at the bottom. Well, I've got in there with some grit paper and taken all the paint off the inside of those tubes, and I still can't get the leg into the hole. So I don't know quite what to do, whether to warm it up a bit maybe. It's very close. It starts to go in, then jams. And what I don't want to happen is I get it halfway in and then I can't get it in or out. I don't think it's supposed to be that tight. I mean, you want it relatively a good fit, but I don't know what other people do. I'll have to have a look around on the forum and see if anybody's had this problem before, but it's incredibly tight fit. Well, as I say, it's almost a slightly interference fit. It's not easy to get it in there at all. I mean, I can press it in. I've got a press to do that, but then the problem with that is, in the end of here, about 1 inch down, you've got to drill a 1/4 diameter hole through it to secure it. And then up the top here, you've got a 1/4 diameter tube running down, so a bolt will go down the tube through the leg and be secured on the other side. Well, if you put the leg in and it jams or twists when you get to the other end, are you ever going to be able to get that hole lined up properly? I don't think so. I think it needs to be able to slide with a little bit of pressure in and out. So I've got to have a look at that, see what I can do to ease it a little bit without wrecking it and making it sloppy. We don't want it sloppy, but we don't want it too tight either. I haven't actually tried the other leg. I must get the other leg out and try it and see if they're both the same. Probably are. So anyway, that's where we are at the moment. Making reasonable progress. I'm going to start on the wiring very shortly. That should be interesting. It's not a real issue to me because I spent 40 years doing electrical and electronic engineering, and wiring is pretty simple to me. Having said that, you never know what might happen. Last thing I want is to be able to put the power on and it all go up in smoke, but unlikely with test cell wire actually, because I think it's low smoke anyway. It'll just go brown and bubble. And anyway, so that's where I am at the moment, and making steady progress. I'm looking to try and complete this project this year. Somebody asked me recently about whether I was on target, how long did I think the whole thing was going to take. I originally budgeted 500 hours and 18 months. To do that, I would have had to have spent 7 hours a week, every week, for 18 months to do the 500 hours. Well, we're actually 2.25 years in, so we're over budget on the time, and I've only managed to spend an average of 3.5 hours a week, which means I will reach the 500 target towards October this year, which would be the so that would be 500 hours and 3 years. So, well, we'll see. It's possible. As you know, I've completed the wings, the tail, everything's done. It's almost time to put all these things together. Getting very close now. Once I've got the wiring done in the tail cone, and I've finished off the last few bits in the cockpit, it'll be time to join the two halves back together again and go out and fit the wings, do the wing rigging, and then it will have to go off to the hangar where it will be living the rest of its life. And luckily I've secured a place in the hangar only a couple of miles away at the local airport where I'm a member. And the best bit is it's free. Yeah, you heard me right. It is free. Whoa! So that's a definite win. Right, I'll try and post some more videos as things happen rather than sort of let it all accumulate as it has done. And so look out, and you should be seeing regular videos over the summer. See you later.